believe that is incredibly dangerous. I personally believe that it is something that is only wanted by a minority of people, and the people that want it are the political class. They're the ones that are benefiting out of this. They're benefiting financially. They're benefiting in terms of the position, the authority they have within society. And I just think it's a damn dangerous thing. I'm really, really worried about it. And I mean, personally, for example, my UK driving licence. My UK driving licence now has a European flag on it and not a Union Jack. So little bit by little bit, they're trying to turn us into having a new identity. They want us to say that we're European first and British second, but it'll never happen because the French will stay French, the British will stay British, and the Italians, God love them, will stay Italian. So it's not going to work.
Well, this is the point, that this tramples on heritage and goes against the will of the people, and this is being done in a very insidious way. Almost not an enslavement of the people, but almost an enslavement of the people, literally in a communist police state. Correct?
Absolutely. I mean, there is a debate. Is this a sort of left-wing form of government or a right-wing form of government? But I do think that the European Union is now beginning to show signs, strong signs of resemblance with what was the Soviet Union. You know, I mean, we haven't got a Politburo, we've got a European Commission. We're beginning to crack down on anybody that has an alternative opinion. We are insular. We are protectionist. The EU has a loathing of America. I mean, a deep loathing of America exists within those Brussels institutions. Believe me, after 10 years, I know how these people think. So, yeah, it is statist. It believes that we must regulate absolutely everything that moves, which is why we now have an EU rule book for British businesses that is now 120,000 pages of close-type legislation, and we wonder why our economies are falling behind America and everywhere else. It really is. It is the statist model. It is the victory of bureaucracy over democracy, and it will lead, I predict confidently, to tyranny unless we, the people, are able to assert ourselves, unless we, the people, are able, and Britain's got to give the lead in this. We've got to force our own politicians in Britain into giving us a referendum on this issue. And, you know, I mean, if the British people in a referendum said, look, we don't care anymore, we've had enough of being British, we don't want a parliament, we don't want democracy, we happen to be governed by these institutions, I wouldn't like that result at all, but at least the people would have chosen. What's happening now is this is being imposed upon us by career politicians who care nothing for the country, who care nothing for their constituents, who appear not to have a conscience even, and they're doing it in their own self-interest. And that is my great battle. My great battle is to make sure that we frighten the British establishment into giving us a referendum on this issue. And we are making progress. You know, on June the 4th this year, we had a national election across the entire UK, and the UK Independence Party, UKIP as it's known, a party that's only been around for just over a decade, we came second across the entire United Kingdom. We beat the governing Labour Party, we beat the Liberal Democrats, and for a party like ours to have come second in a national election shows you that we are beginning to connect with the voters out there in a way that the old parties can't.
Right, but Nigel, let me stop you there. That's the problem. You're becoming a problem. You understand, you're becoming a problem because you're making this great headway in the polls. You guys are having this terrific success, and quite frankly, you're creating problems for this agenda.
Yes, we are creating huge problems for the European agenda, and we're also creating problems in Britain because, you know, we've had, I'm afraid, successive Conservative and Labour governments whose leaders are signed up to the European project. And yes, they don't like what we're saying, and yes, they don't like what we're doing, and hoist this on board. I mean, the last general election in Britain was in 2005, okay? Labour were elected promising the British people they'd give them a referendum on the constitutional treaty. They broke their promise. The third party, the Liberal Democrats, promised they'd vote for a referendum in the House of Commons. They didn't. They voted against. And the Conservative Party, who've been saying for years, support us and we'll give you a referendum, Mr. Cameron has now said that, sadly, there won't be a referendum. I mean, this is, you know, I'm almost not even blaming the people in Europe. I mean, much as they're awful and what they're doing in Brussels is terrible, But it's our own politicians in Britain, our own careerists in Britain, who've led us to this mess. And I'm even angrier with them.
Let's talk about the Lisbon Treaty. You were so prolific in the fight against the Lisbon Treaty, and also Lord Monckton is against this cap and trade and this nonsense of global warming, this absolute fraud being perpetrated on the globe in the form of massive taxation, which will be so harmful to so many families and people dwelling around the globe, to almost literally make it difficult to bear children, right, as part of almost a global depopulation, or at least to break the will and desire to have children because of the expense is how I'm looking at it. So what about this cap and trade and this Lisbon Treaty?
Well, I mean, the Lisbon Treaty itself is effectively a piece of legislation that is an enabling act for the European Union to take whatever powers it wants. It imposes a court, a political court in Luxembourg that ultimately will decide not just how we do business, but what our abortion laws are, what our euthanasia laws are. I mean, our whole life. But of course, one of the great things that the EU now says is we have to have an EU because we have to fight global warming. And it's from the global warming agenda that we've got these crackpot cap and trade schemes, and we've got a new system of taxation where we're just punishing ordinary working families. We're making it more expensive for them to go on a holiday. We're making it harder for them to buy themselves motor cars. And all of this being done in the name of reducing CO2 emissions, and we've known since Kyoto that it actually makes no difference. It's not going to reduce CO2 emissions, and we know since Kyoto that actually the global temperature has cooled since 1998 and not warmed since 1998. And I think climate change, global warming, is being used by the same people that are pushing this kind of supranational EU government. They're using global warming as a means to tax us, as a means to control us. And sadly, too much of the media, certainly here in Europe, and I know that in America there's been more criticism, but so much of the media has just been taken in by this agenda. But again, we are beginning to fight back. And Lord Monckton, who you mentioned, who was a very brilliant man, and I'm pleased to announce that as of today, Lord Monckton has joined the UK Independence Party, and he'll be our national spokesman on climate change and cap and trade.
Ah, fantastic.
And we're delighted and proud to have him. He's a very, very brilliant, brave man.
Fantastic news.
It's good, isn't it? Yeah, I'm really pleased.
Didn't know that, and you made my day with that.
No one did. This is the first interview in which I've said it.
Well, that's absolutely outstanding breaking news, and I'm glad we could put it out on this network.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Nigel, about something that's quite disturbing here in the United States, and I'd like you to address it on the European side. The loss of freedoms in the United States and the developing police state that we're beginning to see here in the United States, and the fact that they have repealed the law that allowed them to use U.S. troops on U.S. soil against U.S. citizens, and the fact that they are training in large numbers U.S. troops in Texas at the moment to use, and the number continues to grow, against U.S. citizens in any type of civil disturbance. As you look around, Nigel, and you see these loss of freedoms taking place in Europe, and you see the police state beginning to envelop the people, what are your thoughts as you see that? I mean, is it the twilight of the Europe that used to be, and we're fading into what is the horror of today?
Before I got involved in politics, I was a businessman. I worked for several American financial services companies, and I traveled extensively across America and across Europe. And one of my hobbies, one of my interests, has been to go and visit the battlefields that exist in Europe. And I'm talking about the Somme and the D-Day beaches and all of these things. And, for people that haven't been and seen Omaha Beach and these places, my word, they do take your breath away. And when you look at the sheer scale of sacrifice that had to be made to defend basic freedoms and basic liberties, to see those things being thrown away by our current politicians as we move into what is now openly called in parts of Europe the post-democratic age. It's a phrase that really should send shivers down people's spines. And, there's always a reason, isn't there? There's always a reason people cite safety and they cite security and they cite the war on terror or whatever else it may be. But if in the fight on the war on terror we give away the very basic freedoms that make us the special countries that we are, then I'm afraid we're losing the war on terror. And I'm very fearful for what's happening. I'm especially fearful in a British context as we get ever deeper post-Lisbon Treaty into this European Union about our whole judicial system. You know, we had something many years ago called the Magna Carta. And the Magna Carta was the thing that gave us, as individuals, the basic freedom against the state